I was really scared.
She was very ill.
You realize that they could experience a hemorrhage in their brain. They could cough up large volumes of blood. This is dangerous stuff.
I was not sure I would make it.
She could have died from it.
It was a realization I had to take control.
Welcome to the Incurables. I'm Don Wildman. Every day, thousands of people walk into the doctor's office and hear the news that changes everything. I'm sorry, there's nothing more we can do for you. Despite all the technological advances of modern medicine, effective treatment for many serious conditions eludes even the best of conventional doctors. Patients who are the subjects of these mysteries are often forced to take matters into their own hands and turn elsewhere for answers. Take the case of Joan Young. She awoke one day expecting it to be like any other, but she noticed something, and that something would send her on an agonizing journey, a journey of astounding discovery. Fear of the unknown can become a debilitating force in a person's life. This dread was about to become the focus of Joan's.
When I looked at my gut level instinct, part of me said something is very wrong. And I noticed that I had some bruises on my arm. And I hadn't touched anything, I hadn't brushed anything. I just was hoping they would go away, but they didn't go away. I realized that I was sick and that I really needed to do something about it. It wasn't just going away. And so that's when I went to a doctor.
Joan's primary care physician carefully examined the strange bruises on her arms and legs and ordered a complete blood count, or a CBC. The original results were inconclusive. A second test again didn't provide enough information for her doctor to make a diagnosis. If her doctor couldn't even tell Joan what was wrong with her, it was impossible to figure out how to fix the problem.
It was just so mysterious, and I was scared. I was scared because it was a mystery. I was scared because I just wasn't feeling well. I kept trying to do things to try to feel better. And I had like blueberry pancakes, thinking that the pancakes would make me feel better, talking to my friend, I thought that would make me feel better. I just did all these things that I thought would help, and in fact, none of them helped. Before I became ill, I was a very active person. I always enjoyed escaping.
Growing up in rural Pennsylvania provided plenty of opportunity for escape. Joan and her younger brother Larry spent their youth enjoying the outdoors, fishing, snow skiing, and exploring the nearby woods. Joan married young and had 2 daughters. 4 years after the birth of her youngest, Andrea, her marriage ended. Now a single mother, Joan struggled to balance her professional career with raising 2 small girls.
I think that she had a hard time, working and keeping her head above water and spending quality time with us and having a personal life. I think it was really hard for her to juggle life back then.
It was coming up on the July 4th weekend, and this time a friend of mine and I decided to go to Canada. And in fact, that July 4th, it was cold.
True to her nature, Joan didn't let a little rain and wind spoil her vacation. The friends were determined to stroll Quebec's beautiful city streets and explore her glorious countryside.
When I returned home, I wasn't feeling well. I thought it was just a flu, but in fact, it turned out to be something very different. Well, I took a few days off from work and, rented some videos and just, drank some tea and lounged on the couch, and I thought, well, that will do it. I'll just get over it like I usually get over colds, but in fact, that didn't happen.
Joan's condition worsened. She became weaker, and that's when she began to notice the bizarre bruises and sores all over her body that seemed to just appear. This was much more serious than a simple flu.
We all just kind of brushed it under the rug, like, oh, she'll be fine. You know, it's nothing serious. She's just, you know, tired, or she just wants to complain for a week because she's tired.
I guess it was a denial, but it was obviously a blood problem. So I went to the hematologist.
Joan came to me really for a second opinion, and her diagnosis came on a platter, and that was immune thrombocytopenic purpura.
And I said, well, what? What is that?
Immune thrombocytopenic purpura, or ITP, is a rare autoimmune bleeding disorder characterized by abnormally low levels of specialized blood cells called platelets. Platelets help prevent and stop bleeding by helping the blood to clot.
There are fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, many treatments for ITP. I say unfortunate because it usually is a sign of our ignorance.
The doctor said, we have to go on prednisone.
And prednisone is one of the standard treatments. It tends to do two things. Number one, it stabilizes the blood vessels which bleed, so it's less likely to permit blood cells to leak through the blood vessels. Number two, whatever immunologic disorder is causing the low platelet count, it attacks that.
And so I went home and, you know, actually started the prednisone in the hospital and went home and continued to take it.
Well, two things for Joan. Number one, it didn't work. And you realize that they could experience a hemorrhage in their brain. They could cough up large volumes of blood. This is dangerous stuff.
I took the next dose of prednisone and I could feel my body race. I could just feel it rev up, like I just put that foot on the gas and it just went on the gas and it just went on the gas, and it didn't stop. You know, I said, I know what I'll do. I have all this energy, I'll take a walk. And so what I did is I took this fast walk and my heart started revving up, but then I said, okay, I'll just slow down and my heart will slow down, I'll be fine. But my heart didn't slow down. I started feeling dizzy, I couldn't stand up, and I collapsed.
Joan was rushed to the hospital. She had suffered a seizure. Her resting heart rate was 120 beats per minute. Her platelet count continued to plummet, and doctors continued to search for a cure.
Back in those days, 1992, the treatments that were commonly used included IVIG, which is a form of immune globulin which blocks the spleen and prevents the spleen from sucking up the platelets.
With the IVIG, my platelets were pretty decent. Then my platelets start going down. That's not unusual for IVIG. It's a temporary treatment, and it's what you would expect. So I had another IVIG, and this one didn't work as well. And then my platelets just started going down again.
Look at these. This is most amazing. 1992, platelets, 0. 0 platelets, that's November 1992.
My doctor was trying very hard to get these platelets up, and he suggested I have a splenectomy.
The condition is caused by antibodies which attack the platelets or coat the platelets, and that simply makes it possible for the spleen to suck them out of the circulation more easily. So by removing the spleen, you remove the organ that is responsible for lowering the platelets.
It is drastic, and nobody would want that for themselves, of course, but it is considered a standard treatment when more conservative measures fail.
I was not sure I would make it. I was not sure I would live through the splenectomy. I went to my closet, dug out my old will, and put it on my dresser.
I wasn't privy to all the information. I didn't know exactly what was wrong. All I knew was that my mom was very sick and she was very depressed.
It was a very difficult operation. I was in intensive care for a little while. I was on high doses of prednisone. I had to deal with coming off the prednisone again.
Shortly after giving her the splenectomy, her platelet count rose to 80 or 90,000 for a short period of time. By the time I saw her a couple of weeks after surgery, her platelet count was again in the 2,000 to 5,000 range. None of those 3 aggressive treatment programs were of any value to her.
And at that point, I said, I'm going to start looking for alternatives because this is just not working.
The hopeless failure of treatment after treatment sent Joan into despair. She began seeing a psychologist to help work out her problems.
One time she reached under her bookshelf and she brought down a book called Recovery from Cancer. And so she suggested I read the book, and I did. And I went home and I read this wonderful account of this woman who had uterine cancer and who recovered using a macrobiotic diet.
Macrobiotics is a nutrition system created in Japan that stresses natural unprocessed foods consisting primarily of grains, vegetables, and fruit.
The first thing that is affected by the food is the blood.
Since my body was attacking my platelets, really in the same way that it attacks allergies that are in your blood, I thought, well, if we could lower the amounts of things in my blood that my body was reacting to, then it just wouldn't be as reactive, period, and that would help me.
When a macrobiotic chef starts preparing a meal, they don't think about what meat, what protein, they think about what grain will be the center of my meal. And there's many different types: brown rice, millet, all different kinds of grain. And you've heard the word holistic. So in macrobiotic cooking, that applies to, we'd use the whole vegetable. We wouldn't throw this away.
While Joan's new diet helped her feel better, it wasn't solving her ITP condition. Continued visits to her hematologist also failed to provide any concrete results.
It was now, end of January, and I came down with what seemed like the flu.
Joan's flu-like symptoms made her even more concerned, and it seemed as if Dr. Nissenblatt was running out of ideas. She decided to see another specialist in New York City. He was so concerned about her diminished blood platelet count that she was admitted immediately to the hospital.
He suggested a dose of vincristine, which is a chemotherapy. Then he suggested prosorbicolum treatments, which are blood washing treatments.
So each week for 3 hours, Joan had all of her blood run through a cleansing system and then transfused back into her body. She did not react well to this treatment.
On the second last blood washing treatment, the 5th out of the 6th, I went to the blood room, with a scarf over my head, and they did this usual, put the needle in here and put the needle in there. And I was sitting there and I wasn't feeling bad when all of a sudden things started to turn black.
Joan Young was at her wit's end. She had done everything the doctors had asked of her, despite the excruciating pain. Nothing had worked, and now her whole world was slipping away.
I was so miserable that they let me out of the hospital to go to a movie, and we saw Groundhog Day. And what was really interesting about that movie was that in there, Bill Murray, he kept reliving the same day and the same day. And the only way he could get out of the day was to change himself. It was a realization I had to take some control. I had to be stronger in finding my own way.
But where to turn? Ironically, it was during an excruciating blood washing treatment that Joan found hope.
There was a nurse named Amy who was teaching the other nurse how to do these treatments, because this was the first time they were ever done in this hospital.
Basically, I walked in the room and I saw somebody hurting and in pain.
She put her hand on my arm like this, and my arm turned all warm. I said, what in the world is going on here? It felt all warm and healing.
The Reiki was the only thing I knew at the time, and it helped her.
We talked about, how platelets make me feel. We visualized fields of daisies. We, had this conversation. And then, then she left, and I went to the doctor's appointment. And he says, okay, we'll measure your platelets. And my platelets were 40,000. He says, well, how could this be? Because I left the hospital, they were much lower. And I felt such a reprieve.
I learned from Joan that she had been getting increasingly educated about things that were other than midstream.
I read a book by Deepak Chopra, and in there he discussed Ayurvedic medicine. It's an ancient Indian system of medicine where they use herbs and meditation and diet to heal. And I thought, well, that's something maybe I can add. I wasn't taking any herbs, and it seemed like, you know, it would fit into what I was doing.
Well, she came to see me specifically for the Ayurvedic approach to healthcare, which is the oldest form of natural healthcare. I was not taking over her care as her subspecialist doing hematology, but rather offering her this natural healthcare system.
I told her that I would be very willing to monitor her platelet count and monitor her health on those treatments, mainly so that if there was a negative reaction from them, that we had come to an agreement that she would allow me to intervene and help her through a problem if something occurred.
I didn't focus on the number of platelets that she had, although they were profoundly abnormally low. I didn't focus on the fact that she had, ecchymosis, bleeding areas in her skin. I focused on the more subtle, profound levels of physiological functioning that I found in her pulse and addressed that.
Over the long, painful months of trying to deal with her disease, she had gone from vibrant and active to fragile and fatigued. Modern medicine had failed her, so she was more than willing to follow the Ayurvedic herbal regimen. She had nothing to lose.
And then she visited her hematologist-oncologist again, and he took a blood test, and her platelet count went way up.
You know, hematologist was astounded, and then they jumped to 190. I said, oh my gosh, and then they kept going up.
The platelet count was on August 3rd, 1994. She had responded very rapidly to the treatments that she had selected, and I felt it had either been a spontaneous remission or a remission induced by the cooperation of her treatment in the setting of her having her spleen removed.
I think, honestly, she related that his reply was, look, I don't know anything about this. I wasn't trained in this, but just indulge me. You know, stop everything that he told you to do and come and see me in whatever, a few weeks. And she went back to him and had her blood taken, and the platelet count dropped precipitously to dangerous levels again. And he said, well, you know, indulge me further. Start doing everything this guy told you to do. And she resumed the program, and he took another blood test, and her platelet count was way up.
On her therapy, you can see these numbers. She started her own program, and she shoots up with her selected remedies. And she's been in remission ever since then.
When I was sick, one of the things that was most devastating, and this may seem strange, but was the thought of never skiing again, because it was just something that transported me, something that I enjoyed. And you know, with a low platelet count, you can imagine that you don't want to do anything where you could even get bumped, let alone fall on a ski slope. So I knew if I wanted to get skiing again that I had to get my platelets up. And exactly 1 year after my January hospitalization in '93, I was able to go skiing again, and I was able to ski the expert slopes.
Her energy was back. She was able to resume her career and many of the activities she had enjoyed before her battle with ITP. Her life, mercifully, was returning to some semblance of normalcy. You might think that someone who had battled ITP as fiercely as Joan had would want nothing more to do with the disease, that they might try to distance themselves from this horrible episode of their lives. But that's not Joan Young's style. She was determined to share her story so that ITP would not do to others what it had done to her. Her first order of business was to launch the Platelet Disorder Support Association to help answer questions and encourage those with the disease.
She'd started the PDSA website and just trying to get information out there. So when she really solidified the organization, we thought it was a great thing.
She has a newsletter that incorporates the newest literature from traditional and non-traditional sources, so that she's a remarkable source for education for anybody who's got a platelet problem.
We should take knowledge with an open mind from wherever it comes, evaluate it. If we find it to be reasonable, incorporate it, and blend it all together so that we can improve the quality of life.
I have learned so much on this journey, and it's helped me. I mean, when I was very ill and you know, on all these medications and bald, I thought, how in the world can this be good? But honestly, it has been an incredible learning experience. I mean, I've learned the effects of diet in my body. I've been able to learn Reiki and can now do it on myself and others. I've learned other different kinds of energy therapies because I think it's a real path to healing. I've learned the power of herbs.
She made a conscious effort to become a little bit more open and more there for my sister and I, more present in her life and in other people's lives.
If you ask Joan Young, her battle against ITP allowed her to accomplish things she never would have attempted before the disease. In her darkest days, it seemed impossible that she would be where she is today. But Joan's willingness, indeed her compulsion to seek answers when none were presented, opened up a whole new world to her. She, in turn, opened up her world to help others. To learn more about Joan Young's story, go to our website. Join us next time for another remarkable story of discovery and personal triumph. I'm Don Wildman for the Incurables.